Most people think learning is like filling a bucket with water. They believe their brain is an empty space, and they just need to pour facts into it. This is how many of us study for a test. We read a book, try to remember every word, and then hope we can pour it all out on the exam paper. This is called memorizing. It can work for a short time, but the information often disappears quickly. Think about it. How much do you remember from a test you took last year? Probably not very much. The facts were like water in a leaky bucket. They flowed in and then quickly flowed out again, leaving very little behind. Syntopic learning is a completely different way to learn. It is not about filling a bucket with single, separate facts. Instead, it is about weaving a strong net of knowledge. Imagine you want to learn about something new, like how to stay healthy. Instead of just reading one book and memorizing its rules, you read several different books or articles. One book might say that eating lots of fruits is best. Another might say that exercise is the most important thing. A third book could talk about getting enough sleep. You are not just collecting facts. You are collecting different ideas about the same topic, which is a much more powerful way to understand things. The goal of syntopic learning is not just to know what people say, but to understand why they say it. You start to see the bigger picture. You are not just a collector of information, you become a detective. You look for clues and connections between the different sources. You ask questions like, why does this author think sleep is so important, while another focuses only on food? This process of questioning and connecting ideas is what makes learning stick. It changes learning from a boring task of remembering into an exciting adventure of discovery, where you are actively building your own understanding. So the big difference is simple. Memorizing is like taking a photo of a single tree. You know what that one tree looks like, but you know nothing about the forest it lives in. Syntopic learning is like climbing a tall mountain to see the entire forest. You see all the different types of trees, how they connect, where the rivers flow, and how everything works together. This method gives you a deep and lasting understanding because you have created a map of the topic in your mind, not just a single isolated snapshot that is easy to forget. It helps you think, not just repeat. Our brains are amazing, but they are not designed to be video recorders that perfectly store every single detail. Your brain is much more interested in meaning than in random facts. Think about a story you love. You might not remember every exact word, but you definitely remember what happened, who the characters were, and how it made you feel. That is because your brain held on to the meaning of the story, not the boring list of words. It does this because meaning is useful. It helps us understand the world and make good decisions. Facts without meaning are like puzzle pieces scattered on a table. They don't form a clear picture. The brain creates strong memories by making connections. Every time you learn something new, tiny brain cells called neurons reach out and connect to other neurons. The more connections a new piece of information has, the stronger the memory becomes. This process is called association. When you learn that a dog is a pet, your brain connects the word dog to other ideas like friendly, furry, barks, and loyal. When you use syntopic learning, you are forcing your brain to make many more of these connections. You are not just learning one fact, you are linking many different ideas together. The hippocampus is a small but very important part of your brain that helps with this process. Think of the hippocampus as a librarian for your memories. When you learn something new, the hippocampus helps to organize it and file it away in the correct place in your long-term memory. It is especially good at handling information that is rich with meaning and connections. When you just memorize a fact, the hippocampus might store it for a little while, but it can easily get lost. But when you compare ideas and build a network of meaning, you give the hippocampus a much better, more detailed file to work with. This is why syntopic learning leads to such strong and lasting memories. When you read about two different diets, for example, your brain is not just storing two separate lists of food. It is actively comparing them. It is creating new connections by thinking, this diet says no sugar, and that one also says no sugar. They must both agree that sugar is bad. Or, this diet focuses on meat, while the other focuses on plants. What are the different reasons for this? These comparison activities build a strong interconnected web of knowledge that is much harder for your brain to forget. When you engage in syntopic learning, you are giving your brain a fantastic workout. The part of your brain right behind your forehead is called the prefrontal cortex. This is your thinking center. It is responsible for problem solving, making decisions, and analyzing complex information. When you just memorize facts, the prefrontal cortex is not very active. It is like lifting a very light weight. It doesn't build much strength. You are simply storing information without really thinking about it. Your brain is on autopilot and the learning is shallow and temporary. However, when you start comparing different points of view, your prefrontal cortex lights up with activity. Let's take an example. You want to learn about whether school uniforms are a good idea. One article might say that uniforms help students focus on learning and reduce bullying. Another article might argue that uniforms stop students from expressing their personality and are too expensive for some families. To understand this topic fully, you cannot just memorize both sides. You have to actively think and compare them. You have to ask yourself important questions and evaluate the evidence each side presents. As you compare these two arguments, your prefrontal cortex gets busy. It weighs the pros and cons. It thinks about which argument is stronger and why. It might even try to come up with a third idea, a compromise that includes the best parts of both sides. This is a much more demanding task for your brain than simple memorization. It is like going to the gym and lifting a challenging weight. It might feel a little harder at first, but this is how your thinking muscles get stronger. You are training your brain to analyze, evaluate, and create its own informed opinions. This mental workout has long-term benefits. By regularly practicing this kind of critical thinking, you become better at solving problems in all areas of your life. You learn not to accept the first piece of information you hear. Instead, you develop the habit of looking for different perspectives and making more thoughtful decisions. Syntopic learning, therefore, does more than just help you pass a test. It builds the essential skills of a smart, independent thinker who can navigate a world full of complex and often conflicting information. It prepares you for real-world challenges. You don't need to be a genius to start using syntopic learning. It is a skill that anyone can develop with a few simple habits. The first and most important habit is to always use more than one source. If you are learning about the planet Mars, don't just read one encyclopedia page. Watch a documentary, read an article from a science website, and maybe even look at a book written for children. Each source will give you a slightly different piece of the puzzle. This variety is the foundation for building a deep and complete understanding of the topic. A great way to organize your thoughts is to make simple charts or diagrams. For example, you can draw a line down the middle of a piece of paper. On one side, write down the main ideas from your first source. On the other side, write down the main ideas from your second source. Then, use different colored pens to draw lines connecting similar ideas, or to circle ideas that are very different. This visual map helps your brain see the relationships between the information clearly. Another powerful technique is to try explaining the topic to someone else in your own words, without looking at your notes. Of course, there are some common mistakes to avoid. The biggest mistake is falling back into the old habit of just memorizing. Remember, your goal is to understand, not just to repeat. Another common error is to only look for sources that agree with what you already think. The real learning happens when you explore different, even opposing points of view. Don't be afraid of ideas that challenge you. They are the best opportunities for your brain to grow. Finally, avoid being passive. Don't just read or watch. Always ask questions, take notes, and actively think about what you are learning. By adopting these simple habits, you can transform the way you learn. Syntopic learning is not a shortcut, but it is a more effective and rewarding path to knowledge. It helps you build a strong, lasting memory for what you study. More importantly, it develops your ability to think critically and understand the world on a much deeper level. It turns you from a passive receiver of information into an active creator of knowledge, a skill that will help you succeed in school and in life. It is the key to unlocking your brain's true potential.